Hi everyone, we're going to go over head layout and head spacing. Right now we have a 16 by 16 area and we're going to show you the traditional way. It was called pattern to pattern layout. And so what we're going to throw in here is the arc patterns with the heads. And as you can see when I click on here, down here, over here it says the radius of the circle. So this is an 8-foot head, and you would see that traditionally at the end of the pattern, the next 8 foot would spray to the end of the pattern, and so on and so forth. And so, and then to make up the coverage in the middle, they would put an 8-foot full. And so it's called pattern to pattern again because it's just each end of the pattern is touching the next pattern. And as you can see, there's not much overlap. You get a little overlap between each of the arcs here and here and here and here. But besides that, you pretty much only have one head covering that zone. This was sufficient when water was cheap and equipment was expensive, but we no longer design like this, mainly because water got expensive and equipment got cheap. And so when equipment went from expensive metal to now cheaper plastics, for the price of one metal head, you can buy several plastic heads. So one of the things that we're going to look at here is this is how much water comes out of a head. So if we had a sprinkler head right here, the most amount of water is typically right around where the head is, and then the further away you go from the head, you decrease water. And so that's typically in this pattern to pattern with lower efficiencies, you get hot spots out here. So now a way to compensate it, because it is a general decrease, is we actually invert it. So we're going to come up here and we flipped it around. And so you can see as soon as we start doing head-to-head spacing and place another head here, is now we have a pretty uniform amount of water going all the way across, versus if I had pattern to pattern spacing, you can see that it's only a little bit of water comparatively in here versus much more on the ends. So this is why we perform head-to-head spacing. And we get a much higher uniformity on the system and much lower water waste. So now we have that 16 by 16 square area, and this is what the head layout would look like with head-to-head spacing. You can see we have the quarters in the corner, but now to complete the head spacing, the head-to-head spacing, now we put halves in between and continue with the fulls. So now I will lay this out for you from scratch. Typically, I always start in the middle. I always want to lay out my fulls. Sorry, I'm going to put this in AutoCAD on my arc layer. Typically, we use AutoCAD. I love using AutoCAD. You can also use Adobe has different products. As long as you're in a vector-based software, most of the industry uses AutoCAD itself. You get to draw in 1-to-1, which is great. So 8 feet is 8 feet when you're drawing it instead of trying to draw it to scale. AutoCAD does offer free student licenses, so you guys can go sign up for that if you want to, and you don't have a computer that runs AutoCAD. an acceptable way to do this is using the old school compass and scale, and you can use the compass to draw out your arcs on paper. It is much slower to do it that way, and so that's why we use AutoCAD. So now we've drawn this first one, which is an 8-foot arc, and now that I know everything is 8 feet, is for head-to-head spacing is I'm just going to add 8 feet. I'm just going to work my way around. And everything works great in this nice little perfect square. And you get head-to-head. You can see that this head is hitting this way and this head's hitting this way. Now in a square, obviously, the water isn't going to go all the way across because of a square with a circular radius. Doesn't work, but we still consider this head-to-head because it's hitting in these directions. You can see here, this head is hitting to the center here, the center of this head, and to this head. So we're maintaining our spacing. Now we have 8 foot. So in this instance, I'm going to come over here to my 8-foot quarter. Now again, if I'm using an 8-foot spray head, if I have 30 pounds of pressure, the highest that radius goes is 8 foot, but I can reduce it down. So typically an 8-foot can go from 8 foot to 5 foot. And then once I hit 5 foot, I would drop down to the 5-foot spray head. Now let's say I had a 10-foot here. I could go a 10-foot head from 10 feet to 8 feet, and then that's when I'd pick back up to the 8-foot. So since this is a perfect 8-foot, I'm going to have my 8-foot quarter, and I'm going to put these in the quarters here. And then my halves. And then my full is going to then be in the center. And now I have optimal coverage for current day irrigation practices. Now I often hear from beginners is, well, you have this as a full arc in here. Essentially, it just takes too much time to trim the circles down. So it's much quicker to go through and just lay them and have the part of the circle stick outside the area. It can get confusing for new people, but as you gain experience, you just understand that with this is half of it's hitting inside your irrigated zone. And so you ignore the half and you put the half. Here we have the quarter, and only the quarter is shooting inside and the other 270 degrees is shooting outside, so we're just ignoring it. So that's a head-to-head spacing. In this example, I have a 10-foot square. And so in a 10-foot, I can simply come through and start placing my arcs in here, which works out perfectly. I don't have to have any halves or any quarters. And so you'll see I'll come and put my 10 quarters in. And this is the most basic of head-to-head design that you can have. You could do this with a bunch of 5 fulls, but like a 5 full in the center with 5s, quarters, and halves all the way around. But with the 10s in here, you'll get suitable coverage, as this is head-to-head, and this will reduce your product use. So it's a balance of maintaining great coverage with enough heads, but not having too many heads out there that become an issue for mowing or other maintenance purposes and cost. So we try and balance between the two. And typically that's where it just comes with experience. My next example right here is going to be similar to what parkway irrigation in front of a home might be. So we have a 5-foot by, in this instance, 30-foot. So I'm gonna go make my radius 5 feet. So I'm shooting all the way across. I'll start laying out my heads. And then this is what I love about AutoCAD. In nice square and rectangular is once you've done one side, you just pick it up and you move it to the other side. And now you have head-to-head spacing. So I'm going to grab my 5-foot heads. You could copy and paste them, you can mirror them, but just to give you a quick example, is now we have head-to-head spacing all the way across in all directions. And this would be your typical layout. Our next example is a 7-foot by 28-foot parkway. And so I'm going to lay out my 7 feet. Where the circle ends, you can see I'm just starting my next head. So in this instance, I have 8-foot heads and 5-foot heads. So if this is 7 feet, do I use a 5-foot head or do I use an 8-foot head? I use the 8-foot head, which I can turn down with the adjustment screw on top from 8 feet to 7 feet. There you go. My last example is another 5-foot parkway. Quickly move through, lay these out. Uh-oh, what happens? You know, in real life, not everything is easily divisible by the radiuses. So you can see I'm either overthrowing, or if I don't put this in, I'm underthrowing. Typically, I'd rather have extra, but the solution to this is, so I don't get any overspray, I make sure that the first one ends at the end, but then I just bring it in just a little bit under the head of the last arc, and this is the good reason in AutoCAD you can easily move it, versus if you draw by hand, it takes a long time to then respace these out. But the name of the game is uniformity. You want everything equally spaced. So even if you have overlap, you want it all pretty much equally spaced right here, which we pretty much do. Everything's equally spaced. And then again, you can come here. And there you have it. I'm going to run out of time here, but you can see what I'm doing.